to episode 4 of the Fill in the Blank podcast. I've got Ivan on the line with me. Ivan and I connected, I think, today on Twitter, had a little bit of a back and forth, Ivan, correct?
That's right.
I called you a bot or a troll, and you said you have no idea. You have very few followers, and you started your account in January. And one of the things I like to do is I like to point those kind of things out to, I guess, what you'd call less sophisticated or less informed or less experienced social media users, because there are a lot of accounts out there that are troll or bot accounts that are bought and paid for by whomever, the Russians, the political operatives, whatever it might be. So that's why I did that. And I apologize for that. But I always give the bot or the account, if they come back, I give them the opportunity to do this. And you're the first that's taken advantage of it. So I thank you for that. So just before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and if you've got some questions, I'm glad to answer them.
Well, I got involved, and I created the account because of an issue. And the issue is takeover of our IT industries by Indian consulting companies.
Right.
And there are already a lot of activists out there. And through this account, I've connected with them. And I've actually connected with others who've been through the same experience that I've had, working in an office that was 90% Indian in an American corporation.
Right.
So my question is, I'm giving away my age, but what is exactly a bot in the Twitter context?
Well, my definition, and I think everybody else's definition is different, or everybody's definition is different. But in my case, I look at it, it's not just so people talk about bots and they think of software automated, no human intervention and all that. And we're going to have a really interesting discussion about the whole immigration thing and H1b program and all that, because I recently sold an IT staffing company that had about 800 employees, and we were using some H1b talent. Most of the time we were transferring visas for people who wanted to come to work for us who were being mistreated by the companies they worked for. And we can get into that later. But so I think we can have a really interesting discussion on that. But when I'm talking about a troll or a bot account, I'm talking about an account that is specifically designed to misinform people or mislead people about what their intent is. So, for example, there are lots of people out there that are working for different political parties or political agendas, and they're semi-automated. I mean, you've probably seen products like Hootsuite or TweetDeck or whatever, and you can run 4 or 5 accounts at a time, 6, 7, 8, 10 accounts at a time if you want, and have discussions between those accounts and make it look like an issue or something is more prevalent than it really is, right? So when I talk about troll or bot, it's just those misinformation kind of accounts, or accounts that are designed to intimidate people into silence, right? And subvert their free speech on social media.
Okay, that's the intention I get when people refer to me as a bot, because this is an issue that I really believe in, and I've actually been threatened by some people, in a roundabout way.
Right.
So that's why I prefer to be anonymous.
Which is fine. I mean, I have no problem with that.
Right.
And we've never met before. We've never talked before. It was just that exchange on Twitter. So
right.
So why don't you continue and tell me about your experience and what your concern is and your beef, and I'll probably challenge you on a few things. We're probably going to agree on a lot of things, but I think we can have a pretty interesting dialogue on this topic specifically, and I wasn't really expecting it, but that's great.
Okay. Well, without getting into too much detail, I worked at a large American corporation where the office was over 90% Indian. Now,
was it all IT?
It was all IT, yes.
Okay.
It was all IT. Uh, the lingua franca in the office, the language that was used mostly, wasn't English. It was Hindu. Uh, there were a few other people from other places there, not many, and we found it to be very insular. I left that job after 3 months. I just couldn't take it anymore.
Right.
So I'm coming from that experience. Now, when I was working there, I thought I was like the only one experiencing something like that until I actually got onto Twitter and talked to more people and found out that this is a common experience. So, I mean, that's where I'm coming from.
Right. So let me ask you a question. Why do you think that
Sure.
that employer was using so many? So, question before that: were 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 the people that you're talking about, were they green card holders? Were they permanent residents? Were they H1b
No,
visa holders? Like, what
they
what
were
was their
they were
immigration status?
they were H1b visa holders, definitely.
Okay.
Uh, and the middle management in our company, they were also H1B. I don't know if they were green card status or what, but they were also visa workers. I don't know what the status of their visa was or their residency, but
But
they
they had
it
come
seemed
through
to
the
me
visa process prior,
right. They came
perhaps?
to the
Okay.
exactly yes. So it seemed to me that they were bringing over people that they knew over there. Do you understand? I think there
Absolutely.
was like two there were like
Absolutely.
two cousins there,
Yeah.
and there was another group that were from the same village.
Right.
And
What I found is that amongst the Indian population, someone's a cousin if they live within 600 miles of you. I mean, they use that term. I'm exaggerating, but they use that term to include people that aren't really part of their family or even their extended family. People like you said from their village or their community.
right, but if you have a manager that has those kind of hiring practices, what chance do Americans have
Right.
when they apply? And that's our beef actually,
So, but let me
part of
ask
our
you a
beef.
question about that. Why the employer, let's say, not the
Hmm.
the mid-level manager, but the actual employer? What was
The employer doesn't
their
care.
their strategy? Okay.
Their employer doesn't care. The employer cares about their stock price. Okay, and their employer cares that they don't get involved in the machinations of IT. They just care when they get their report back that says everything's okay or not.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I mean, you've raised some interesting points because, um, so I've been through this, right? A lot. I had to sign paperwork. I had to make commitments to the federal government in terms of these visas that we processed and things like that. And when you go to
hmm
process one of these visas, even a transfer, you've got to advertise the job and you have to show in the application how many applicants you had. In other words, there is a part of that process that is designed to keep American workers working if they are qualified for those jobs, right? And
well,
we
that check doesn't seem to be working.
right,
Number one.
right.
Number two, the question I have for you is what was the makeup of all the visa holders that you had? Were they primarily from India or were they from Europe? Or
They were
I'm curious.
primarily from India, a few from
Mm-hmm.
China, a few
Mm-hmm.
from like the Philippines and elsewhere, but predominantly from India.
Why?
Um,
My question is why.
Well, so what I would say is that it appears to me that a few decades ago, the
Mm-hmm.
Indian educational institutions, which I think are highly connected to like the federal government,
Mm-hmm.
decided that IT and technology at a very practical level was going to be a focus for them. And uh, they put in place things like you will probably understand this, Ivan, but the average listener who isn't in IT may not understand this, but they actually had
Mm-hmm.
degrees or degree programs in SAP, right? SAP development. So
Mm-hmm.
they were doing ERP kinds of degrees while we were doing computer science degree or a
Okay.
computer engineering and science degree. Very broad, very theoretical, and not much application. And so you could literally hire, at the time they were doing this, SAP was being rolled out everywhere because it was kind of a
Mhm.
revolutionary move from MRP systems.
Mhm.
Uh, there weren't enough people available. I mean, you just couldn't find them. You either had to make them yourself by sending them to classes, or you might be able to find people on visas. And
Mhm.
what I believe, well, I know this has happened, is so we were in the IT staffing business. So we
Right.
had uh, employees on staff who were moving from assignment to assignment. They were contingent workers for our employers, but they were our W 2 employees for the most part. Some were
Okay.
1099, some were corp to corp resources, but for the most part, W 2 employees. And we would move
Mhm.
them from assignment to assignment. So our core competence was recruiting. Competencies were recruiting and developing strong client relationships, understanding their need, and being able to balance those things. So what
Mhm.
we saw is after kind of the Y2K bubble broke, we saw a lot of Indian folks who got like permanent residency, green cards, U.S. citizenship. They started to
Mhm.
build out smaller IT staffing companies because they understood
Right.
the visa process. And so they would bring friends and family over, or people who were
Mhm.
referred to them, and started building.
Mhm.
And then ultimately, some of those companies became thousands and thousands of people. Almost
Right.
almost all Indian heritage, right? Eastern Indian
Mhm.
heritage people
Mhm.
uh, in those companies, right? And then we saw the rise
Mhm.
of companies like Cognizant and TCS.
Accenture and HCL and
Yeah,
whatever.
all of
Right.
those companies,
But
right?
but you just hit the nail on the head. Most of these people, when they came here and they graduate, they said they're starting new businesses. All the new businesses were IT staffing companies,
Right,
right?
right,
Most of them.
right.
So what kind of industry is this? I mean, what is the benefit to American society? I don't see it. They're all these are industries built to resettle even more people over here.
Uh,
It's not about creating anything or creating anything of value. It's about moving the people.
so I
I
think
mean,
there are two issues here, right?
hmm
One is a visa program being used by American companies
right,
to staff for IT, and whether there are abuses there or not. And of course, there are abuses there, right? I mean, I'll
right,
stipulate that. Yeah, I mean, we would hire people away from our competitors all the time because they were being abused as employees because
hmm
they were thought of by their prior employer as indentured servants, like, right? Because the employer holds the visa, and
right.
that employee can go elsewhere, but that visa movement process isn't exactly, it's not like you or I as American citizens or green card holders can move from job to job and there's
Nor should it be.
no friction, right?
Nor should it be. First of all, the H1b visa, and I don't care how many times you bang away at it, that it's dual intent. It's in the title. It's a temporary work visa that is supposed to satisfy work shortages.
Right.
We are now in a position where we are heading for 30% unemployment. You
Right.
understand?
Right.
And now,
I
you know,
totally understand that. Right. And there have been some great questions asked today, even on Twitter, of who should be hired back first. Should it
right.
be W 2 uh, U.S. citizens,
Employees.
right? And
Yes,
employees.
employees.
Well, some of these people are employees, though. See, that's the other thing. Some of them are, clients, as you probably know, have a mix of full time employees and contingent labor,
Right.
and much of
Unfortunately, but yes.
much of the contingent labor um, ends up being visa workers. I don't know what percent it
Mm-hmm.
is, but it's probably somewhere between 25 and 50% of all the folks out there that are doing IT staffing work, contingent work. It's probably
Right.
that's my best guess.
Right.
Now, many companies have decided, because they were facing a shortage of IT workers in the marketplace, to process visas. So there are many American companies who that process visas and have W-2 employees on their staff who are
Hmm.
on H1b visas. And
Right.
by
On
law,
H1B
by
H1B visas, temporary visas again,
ru-
temporary work visas. They may have changed their immigration status or whatever through whatever loophole, but they came in on temporary work visas. It's
well,
plainly stated in the title.
right, but it's so you can, but the program is a bridge to become getting a
See,
green card and becoming a U.S. citizen.
that was never fully explained. I think when they passed the Immigration Act of 1990.
Yeah, that I do not know about, and I'm going to
Uh
do
huh.
some research on that because
Right.
I never really thought about that, but
Because had this passed as a bridge to green cards, I guarantee you it never would have passed. Especially in '90. You
uh,
know.
yeah, you're probably, and I'm thinking in the
Hmm.
'90s there may have been another reason for this, that it wasn't IT workers necessarily back then because
Y2K. They were freaking out about
Y2K, yeah.
Y2K.
I don't know that many people though that were focused on Y2K in 1990. It seemed like it was 95, 96, and then everybody went
Right.
crazy.
There were planners there, and it was thought about. I mean, they were talking about it in '85 for God's sakes.
Yeah.
They weren't
Okay.
panicking
So
about it. They
I've
were
got to
talking
got to
about it.
check on that. So it's a kind of a dual problem, and you can have an H1B visa and you can renew it. So it's 3 years. You can renew it
Hmm.
one time and get another 3 years. And there's some other like contingencies where you can get a little more time, but pretty much it's 3 years, and you need to go back if you aren't able to get your citizenship or green card status by then you've got to leave the country. Um,
Right.
and
It kind of underlines the temporary and temporary work visa. I understand that.
yeah, uh, so um, it's so. Let me ask you this: how do you feel about illegal immigration? I guess it's like I want to go somewhere with this, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But so, how do you feel about illegal immigration?
Illegal immigration, it's the same thing. It's on the low end for blue collar workers, and honestly, and I was a part of it as a white collar worker. I ignored what happened with blue collar workers,
Right.
and their positions being decimated. It's the same thing to me, both illegal and this mass legal immigration. Now, I'm not. You can talk to the most hardline anti-immigrant person around, and even when you really press them, they'll admit, well, you know what, we've got to have some immigration.
Right.
You understand?
Right.
But what's happened now is we're not even controlling our immigration. Our immigration policy is in effect being controlled by lobby groups for Indian IT staffing companies. You
Right.
know,
Right.
being a major part of that.
Right. So
That's a problem.
here's where I was going to go with this. Okay,
Hmm.
we have immigration laws in place um, to take care of or deal with illegal immigrants, but we don't enforce those laws. There are laws and
Hmm.
regulations in place to enforce immigration laws with H1B programs and the abuse there, and
They're not being used because the
oftentimes
program is being
yeah they're being
the,
the programs are being abused.
exactly to no end.
Yeah, the most of the prosecutions that I've seen have been like big companies that are strictly pure play H1B visa kind of wholesale companies. So
Hmm.
they would come in and provide IT services or people to an American company or to companies like mine where we couldn't find the people either. They would subcontract through us because in many cases those smaller companies their only core competency is processing visas. They can't
Hmm.
sell. There are some communication issues in terms of language that impede that. But uh, the most of the prosecutions I've seen, and you can go out and Google them. I mean, they're all over the place. Are
Hmm.
large companies who reach some levels or caps or things, and then they would start another company, but they wouldn't
Right.
identify it as owned by the same person, and there would be these games
Right.
going back and forth and things like that. Those kind of
Right.
abuses, those were more. I look at those as more almost workers' rights or civil rights abuses. They were abusing the system and abusing their employees. In terms of the way they treated them, they weren't abusing the system to avoid hiring Americans because they were never going to do that, right?
Right.
It's those bigger companies,
Which
like,
is against the law itself. Which is
correct,
completely against the law itself.
correct. I mean, you
Right.
are supposed to hire an American permanent resident or citizen before you're. I mean, you've got to show a case for hiring or processing H1b visas. Now,
Mm-hmm.
for the longest time, we had been with negative unemployment in the IT space, right?
That's not. Excuse me. That is not true. In the IT space, many workers that have hit 45 or 50, especially American ones, have been just thrown out and replaced with H-1B workers. I mean, if you
I
look on Twitter,
yeah.
half of the people, that have been through the same experience as me, that's been their experience.
Well,
And
I
in
think
fact, I
I
invite them to Twitter you their stories just to
right.
see
Yeah,
that
and I'd like to see
I'm not
those.
just some oddball out there in space.
Yeah, I think, and I know you're not an oddball out there in space because I've heard this before, and I've heard
Mm-hmm.
stories, and we've done the research and we've seen it. But I am going to go out on a limb here and say that many of those abuses are happening on the West Coast in large technology companies.
Here on
I,
the East Coast too.
yeah, well, maybe the East Coast, but
Not
I
just
will
the
tell
West
you that
Coast.
in the Midwest here where we are, Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
Columbus, I've seen none of that. I've experienced none of it. And trust me, I would see it because of the way we're embedded in clients, very large clients. Haven't
Mm-hmm.
seen that. Have and we don't do much business on the West Coast, or we hadn't.
Mm-hmm.
Phoenix was about as far as we went, but
Mm-hmm.
I have heard many stories. We had many employees, H1B and others, that have moved either back to Ohio from the West Coast
Mm-hmm.
or an H1B visa transfer from the West Coast because you come here and you make virtually the same amount of money, but the cost of living is, a third of what it would be in the
Much
Bay
cheaper,
Area,
right?
right?
Right.
So, and
Right.
they've told us the stories about those abuses. And all I can
Mm-hmm.
say is if you're a big company and you've got a lot of lobbyists and a lot of immigration lawyers and a lot of administrators, you can probably overwhelm the immigration examiners just because there aren't enough of them. I mean, I think that is one of
Right.
the problems that the regulations are not being enforced because there aren't enough people to do it. And if they
Well,
did
that's
it
that's
and
that's a possibility
yeah,
also. Yeah.
if
I
they
mean,
did it and fined people, they could pay for themselves and the abuse would stop or be mitigated. But
well, one of the things are the fines are paltry. I mean, you're dealing with multi-billion-dollar companies.
right,
If they get a $1 or $2 million fine, that's just the cost of business to them. You know what I mean?
correct,
So,
correct. So the fines need to be increased, right? Or something in the provisions that say if you do that, you're no longer allowed to use those workers, and if you do, it's a criminal. There's criminal penalty behind it for the company
or
and for the
your
executive.
business license is pulled. You,
Right,
you no longer can do business.
right,
And if you're here on a visa, so long.
yeah. Or
You know.
you can't do business with the federal government. All those companies are big providers to the federal government.
I mean, one of the things that is most appalling to me is I saw a list. Michelle Malkin has a list of about, I think it's like 54 tweets or something of job losses that are currently happening. And one of the tweets I saw was the Tennessee Valley Authority. And 1 out of 5 of their tech workers, they're going to outsource, obviously to India, right?
Right,
Now, the Tennessee Valley, the TVA was set up by Roosevelt as a jobs program for Americans.
right, right.
And they're going to outsource?
And
I
then
mean,
you've
come
also
on.
got, there's a lot of, I believe, there's a lot of nuclear research involved with the TVA as well. Uh,
We have some of the finest universities in this country. I'm sorry. And they hands over heels out of anything out of India. Okay? Even their vaunted IIT can't even keep track of a spaceship. All right? That they tried to land on the moon.
right,
So don't tell me that our universities are not graduating, American
right.
graduates.
Talent.
That's
Yeah,
laughable.
yeah,
That is laughable.
yeah. So I mean,
Okay?
this is a great, in times of, in times when we're prosperous, a lot of things get
Mm-hmm.
overlooked or swept under the rug. This
Mhm.
is going to be a real wake up call, and we haven't had one since 2008. There are a
Mhm.
lot of people in the workforce that have never experienced this before, right? Because
Mhm.
if you were, let's say, 15 or 17 in 2008, right, you're 27, 28 now, 29, whatever,
Mhm.
and it's probably going to be like, what the hell is going on, right? Uh,
Right.
because it's you've never been able to not get a job, you've never been able to not move from job to job if you didn't like your job, right? And there's always been this yin and yang between employers have the upper hand and employees have the upper hand in terms of negotiation for salary and compensation and things like that based on
Right.
unemployment. And
Well, I mean,
we're going rapidly to high unemployment. It's going to be very challenging for a lot of people.
it's going to be challenging for a lot of people, but I think it's going to shoot back up. I mean, it's because the fundamentals that were previously there are still
We're
there.
very
You
strong,
know,
correct?
we're just now we're dealing. We have to isolate in the house. Of course, the economy is going to slow down now. So it's just about getting through this. I guess first wave of this pandemic, and I have a feeling it's not going to take a long recovery like it did after 2008. I think it's going to shoot back up.
Oh,
But then again, I'm an optimist.
yeah, and I am as well. But I do agree with that. Now there are going to be
Yeah.
uh, there are going to be some long lasting impacts for some industries and people. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't think our employment rate. I think our economy is going to do better than our people, if that makes any sense. I think people are going to spend
I
money
understand what you're
and all
saying.
that, but
Yeah.
getting hired back
Right.
uh, is going to be
Or getting to
it's just
permanent
going to be a
employment.
slower process than people getting laid off. I mean, my daughter was talking to a friend here. My daughter is now on the East Coast, but she was
Hmm.
talking to one of her friends who's still here, and they do like event management, and half the company was laid off, and they're large, right? Half
Yeah.
the company was laid off because all events have been canceled, right?
Yeah. All of the people facing jobs, are going to have they're going to have a lot of trouble. Ironically, the jobs that are taken by foreign Indian IT workers, where you can work from home, they're going to be okay. I
Right,
mean,
right,
you know,
yeah.
so
It's a wild
well,
world, world we're living in. So I try to keep these podcasts to less than like 30, 35 minutes. So I don't want to cut you off. We've got
no
a little more
problem.
time now. I mean, it's not strict. Um,
Okay.
but what else do you have to say about this topic? I mean, is there anything else that we haven't covered? Because it really is an interesting topic, and I think most Americans, I mean, unless you're in the IT business or you're in a business and you know something about this, I mean, they're totally oblivious to the way
Yeah, and
this works. Totally.
ex- exactly. That's why I think you know Donald Trump was right. Twitter is a great tool because I you can connect with more and more people and more American voters, and when they hear what's actually going on, they're appalled.
Right.
You know, so I think it's just a matter of awareness and getting the message out to other American voters.
So how do you
You know what I mean?
feel? How do you
So if
feel
that
about?
makes me a bot, whatever.
No. You're obviously you're not. But how do you feel about merit-based immigration?
I already said, even the most ardent anti-immigrant, if you really press them, they will say, well, you know what, we do need some immigration. And I think right there is where merit-based immigration comes.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's if you graduated from with top honors at Oxford, okay, and you want to come to America and there's a position that needs you, okay. If you're really some kind of superstar from I don't know IIT in India, although after my experience, I highly doubt there are any, but that's just my prejudice. Um, you should be able to come in if you meet the criteria. You follow?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And
So there is a place for merit-based immigration, but
right.
not in the enormous numbers that we have now, and certainly not for low-level IT. I mean, there's plenty of college graduates, you know, around that can do WordPress and design web pages.
Right.
We don't need to import workers from India for that.
No, not
We
at
just
all.
don't.
I mean,
You know.
if it's things like data science or artificial intelligence where there aren't a lot of people right now, maybe, but I totally understand where you're coming from, and I've said that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, we would certainly be at 800 people, the tail wagging the dog on this topic, where there are, some of our clients had 8,000 people in their IT
Mm-hmm.
departments, right? And those aren't
Well,
even the biggest.
let's
Uh,
let's move from IT. What is the requirement to import H1b labor for marketing? You know,
yeah, I don't think
where I don't
I
understand the
don't think
need
there's
there.
much of that, but there might
It's
be.
very common.
I'm not aware of it, right? I'm just
Oh, it's very
unaware.
common.
Yeah.
Right, right. It's very common.
And when you say marketing, uh,
I'm talking about business, uh, not business analytics, but marketing, product ownership, that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
okay, okay,
Yeah.
uh, not creative development, advertising, and things like that. But
Yes, advertising, creative. I think one of the best people to talk to about this is either U.S. tech workers or uh, uh, the other Twitter handle I sent you, because it was through them that I've become quite active in getting the message out. You know,
okay, if you get, I'll go
so
take
and
a
you
look.
get
If you
you'll
get
be
it,
far
I
more
may
knowledgeable
I may
actually.
send you a DM and ask you for that because
Okay.
I don't know much. It's not that I don't
Mhm.
believe it's happening. I just don't know much outside of IT. Like I know there is
Mhm.
some in medicine and things like that,
Mhm.
but uh, IT
There's
is.
there's 1,200 doctors. There's 1,200 doctors who are what is it, uh, uh, non-resident doctors who should be residents. I mean, should we be taking care of them first? Shouldn't they have a chance, to spend their 500,000 education that they spend?
Yeah,
You
and
know,
those are people who've gone to U.S. med schools.
U.S. medical schools, yes.
Huh.
In fact, I'll tweet the article to you. How's
Yeah, I
that?
think I saw it today. I think I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can't find it, I'll DM you and let you know.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else before
So
we
this
wrap
is
up?
no. Thank you for having a great discussion. I mean,
No, you're
this is
welcome.
really good.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
will once I get it edited up and produced up, which is not going to take very long, and it's not very extravagant, but I got to put
Hmm.
a front and back on it and stuff like that. And I'll put your Twitter handle up there for anybody who wants to communicate with you. Right. So
Uh, you know what? I
no.
prefer you didn't.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right. That's fine.
because I'm gonna get inundated with a lot of H1Bs.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Well, that's fine. That's
you
fine.
know,
Yeah.
that's what I appreciate.
So if
All right.
someone goes through the work, but I do appreciate you being on, Ivan, and uh,
No problem.
good luck and stay both safe and healthy during the next few weeks because this has
Yeah.
been
Same for you guys.
a
It's
wild
bad.
ride.
Yeah. I know two people that have died already. Can you
Yeah.
believe that? I know somebody who died yesterday
Wow.
and somebody who died the day before.
How
So
old
this
were
is
they?
real. One was 42, and the other one I think was 50, 50 something, 56.
Did they have any underlying health conditions or?
Not that I know
Wow. That's the
of.
scary part for me um, to
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
about that.
Well, just try to stay as healthy as you can and practice
Yeah.
physical distancing. And
Yeah.
I think we'll muddle through this.
Yeah, we'll definitely get through it. It just depends on. I think it's just the question of how bad is it going to be. Um,
Yeah, I'm looking at Italy, so.
well,
But
and
I
then you
heard
could look at
Italy
Hong
it's getting
Kong, where
better.
they thought they had it handled, and then they kind of went back to normal life or semi-normal life, and it's popped back
Hmm.
up again. So,
Has it popped back? Has it popped back up? I
yeah,
didn't
take a
know
look.
that.
I just saw a couple stories today and a couple of the stats, and it's not positive, right? It's not positive for
Hmm.
a real quick return to normalcy. Um,
Hmm.
we may be social distancing for a while, which is
Whatever
really
it takes.
strange.
We're Americans. You know what? My grandfather, they went through World War II. So if we can just stay,
Right,
locked up for
exactly.
2 or 3 weeks, I think we'll be okay.
I'm with you,
You
man.
know.
Okay. Ivan,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Okay.
As I said, stay
You too.
safe and stay healthy.
Okay. You too.
Okay.
Take care.
Yep. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.